Hey everyone, this is the first Spoon Editorial podcast of 2020. Welcome everyone. Let's go around the horn and let everyone chirp up and say how they're doing. Catherine Lamb, how are you doing?
I am doing great, Mike. I'm living life in Seattle. We're having a snow day today.
Yes, and in that snow, Chris Albrecht ventured out to get supplies. I felt like it was a snowy version of like Walking Dead episode, and you made it back though.
I did. What should have been like a 20-minute trip turned into over just about an hour. So it's kind of crazy. And it is a literal school day as my son is home today, frolicking out in the white conditions.
Did you see any zombies or maybe snow zombies?
Some White Walkers.
Some White Walkers. The Walking Dead snowmen. Jen, is it snowy where you're at, Jen Marston?
Not at all. In fact, it's about 60 degrees and humid.
All right. Global warming. Good to hear.
Yep. I mean, exactly. Like, who doesn't want to raise a glass to that?
Everyone's going to want to live in Washington State eventually because we're the only ones who are getting moisture and still cold weather. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about CES, and we got back. Catherine, you and I were there the longest. We got there on Sunday, did some of the press events. And just like last year, Impossible came and made quite a lot of noise, and they surprised me with what they announced. Talk a little bit about it.
Yes, so we knew that Impossible was going to announce something. Last year, we were at the event where they unveiled their Impossible Burger 2.0, the new and improved recipe for their meatless beef made with heme. And then this year they had teased on Twitter that they were going to unveil something even more exciting. So we had been speculating, was it going to be a Burger 3.0? Was it going to be Impossible Fish, which they'd teased before, or Impossible Steak, which is last year what Pat Brown told us in an interview was going to be their next product.
And we broke that story, by the way.
Oh yeah, no bragging. But drum roll please. It was pork. So we had Impossible plant-based pork. It was pretty cool. Mike and I got to be some of the first people in the world to taste it. And we had it in a bunch of applications. It was in bao. It was cooked over some noodles, banh mi, dumplings. And Pat Brown and a few other Impossible folks talked a little bit about how they develop the pork. So it's a ground pork, and it also has the heme, the genetically engineered chemical that makes the burgers bleed. It has some of that, but it has less of that. And it has a slightly different flavor profile, a slightly different texture. It's a little more coarse than the beef. And it has a little bit less fat and saturated fat, but a lot more sodium than traditional pork. And I thought it tasted pretty good, albeit, like, admittedly, I don't eat pork regularly. So, Mike, what did you think?
It was really good. I think the flavor was admittedly dialed a little bit low in terms of just the flavor of it, but the mouthfeel was really pretty much spot on. And I think that was all intentional because I think pork is much more of a blank palate than beef. I think, like, with the bao that they had like a lot of this kind of their own sauces on it, and it tasted really good. Granted, we're eating in like a nice restaurant where a chef prepared it. But overall it was good. I have to say, just generally this CES compared to last CES, Impossible went a lot bigger. It seemed like there's a lot more press. They had like a big camera crew there. It seemed a lot more guerrilla style last year. And this year, after seeing like we were the only ones in the press conference last year with a camera or video camera, they brought a lot of their own. And everyone was excited. I also said, just generally, I thought this was funny or interesting. A lot of my Jewish friends who were at CES were so excited to taste this pork because normally they obviously can't have pork, but they were okay with plant-based pork. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that, and they said it's kosher and halal certified, or will be. So that was interesting. And to your point about how this year was a much bigger production and it was just like definitely fancier and more put together, I think it's because last year they were the first like edible food company to come to CES, and not a lot of people really took them seriously, I think, at first, or considered them really seriously. And then they won all these awards, including a best of the best from Engadget. So I think this year people are like, oh, wait, this is a big deal. Let's give them some attention and maybe pave the way for some new alternative food companies, which would be really exciting to see at CES in the future. And also they announced the Burger King partnership where they're going to have a Burger King plant-based pork sausage croissant sandwich starting in 5 locations.
It was almost like they had pork, but then they also said, oh, by the way, we're going to have sausage.
Right, but you couldn't taste the sausage. So you
couldn't taste the sausage there. The pork was there ready to have, which pork is just a big deal. Like if you think about like China, and if they start to expand globally, it's a really big deal. So I think there's just those implications, which are interesting. Chris, I know you were there for just a little bit. I don't think you ever got over to the convention center because you kind of had a short time frame. Are you excited about pork?
I'm excited about, can we call it fork? Fake pork?
Fake pork.
Well, it's PHORK, fork.
Yeah, obviously a PH, yeah.
So what's interesting is I was playing video games last night with some other middle-aged friends of mine, and they had heard about the Impossible Pork launch, which I thought was just kind of telling, right? Like from a year ago, where Impossible, no one really, I had to explain it to people. They were like, yeah, my wife loves it. She's a total, everyone she meets, she's like, yeah, you got to eat the Impossible Burger. But what they had heard is that what's just, I didn't bring it up. They brought it up and they're like, yeah, I heard it wasn't very good. So
interesting.
I bring that up, just it's a small little bit, but like two people who aren't in this business, who don't really follow it, knew about the launch and then had heard that it didn't taste that great. And that was their sort of impression. So it's just interesting that Impossible now is sort of, I don't know, as it gets more into mainstream, these are the kinds of new issues that are coming up.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. Also, Catherine, you have a piece that's going up in our newsletter that I think is interesting. Because who's the company that's coming? There's going to be another fake meat company at CES next year.
Yes, though a different type of fake meat. So I went and met with this company called Meatable, who we've covered before. They're a Dutch company, and they are creating like lab-grown, aka cell-based, aka cultured meat, specifically pork from animal cells. They grow it in a lab setting, so it's pork, muscle, and fat tissue, the same genetically as comes from an actual pig, but without having to slaughter an animal. So it's cell-based meat, and they were at CES this year. They just had a booth where they were showing off some photos and some videos of their technology, but I spoke with the CEO who said that they're hoping to sort of copy the energy that Impossible had last year when they debuted their Beef 2.0, next year bringing in their cell-based pork, and probably not for a tasting on as large a scale as Impossible, because it's a lot more expensive to grow meat in a lab than it is to put together some soy with some different processing methods. But they will be having a taste test, and they're hoping to emulate that sort of media blitz with cell-based meat. So that'll be interesting.
Weird, like the Consumer Electronics Show is where, it's now becoming, you have all these, everybody sort of piles on, obviously, not realizing you can't really mimic it every time amount of success. But I just thought that's interesting that the CES, where you buy your smart fridges and convection ovens. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but it's still interesting that now it seems to be becoming like a launch pad for these fake meat companies.
Right. And I think, we'll see if it works, because I think Impossible was so new and exciting that people got really into it. And their argument is that it's a tech show. Food is a technology. We're working to improve upon it, iterate on it, and leverage new technology to make it taste better. But there's an argument that if it gets too diluted, as you're saying, it kind of loses its potency. And also people are like, should this be in the same show as like all this virtual reality and robotics, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, I think it remains to be seen.
I mean, I think last year there was some criticism that CES has become like this show where like there's just a lot of superficial dumb stuff. and people are saying, hey, where's the technology that you can harness to make the world a little bit better? The world's on fire. And so I think CES has been like kind of going beyond the bounds of like TVs for like the last 10, 15 years. I think there's room for this. And hey, it's like the one consumer technology conference where everyone in the world gets together at one time at the beginning of the year and talks about stuff. So I think it's cool. But to your point, Chris, it wasn't just fake meat. There were robots there. And we saw a little bit of food robotics. I actually didn't get over, I don't think any of us got over to see that the Samsung Chef Bot, but I thought the video was cool. I think maybe Engadget had a good video. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've been having a lot of discussion, or I've been a lot of discussion on LinkedIn around what is a robot and what isn't, and what kind of robot should we need in the kitchen especially. And you're right, Samsung and LG both debuted like articulating arm robots that gripped things and poured things, and I think Samsung's even wielded a knife. And it's really this weird, like, what do you consider a robot versus what do you consider an appliance, and what makes the most sense when you're in the kitchen? The Samsung one seems strikingly similar to the Moley robot.
It was. It basically seemed like a knockoff.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting. Although I suppose what I was reading is it has some really cool like micro control gestures, so it can do things like really minute things really well, really elegant.
Yeah, the video showed it handling like with pretty fine precision, like small utensils. I thought it was cool.
The idea is always about like making things convenient, but what is the most convenient form factor for that? Is it another set of mechanical limbs bolted underneath your cabinet? Or is it something like the Thermomix or the Julia was just unveiled from Cooking Pal? And those are things where it's these all-in-one cooking devices with guided cooking, where it just says like, okay, add the sweet potatoes now, and it'll weigh, how many sweet potatoes, has a scale inside, and it chops and cooks and kneads all those for you. Like, what's the better place to put our energies into making things more convenient? I think it's an open-ended question, but I think an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's this constant debate. We have this around Articulate. Is like, what's an appliance? What's appliance? What's automation? What's a robot? I think it's a continuum. I think roboticists would have more specific answers. But yeah, I mean, listen, I think 10 years from now, I can't wait to see like fast forward, well, some of these things will actually be rolling out. Most of the stuff in the like the chef bot from Samsung seemed like proof of concept stuff. But like we did also see at CES, like Picnic from Seattle actually serving pizza in a high volume way in the kind of the convention center. So there was some stuff actually that's in market, more professional application stuff, dishing up stuff and kind of a high volume way.
Yeah, and people were loving the Picnic. I stopped by to check it out, and it took me a while to find it because it was so naturally integrated in. It was in the little food court area, and just serving pizza. People got in line, served the pizza. I think it was like $5 or $6 for a big slice, and it was just so natural looking. And they did have to have people to man it and actually like slice the pizzas, so it wasn't completely robotic. It wasn't like flashy like some of these other things sounds like they are, but it was interesting to see that integrated so naturally into the CES floor.
On the smaller side where automation is applied, we call them bots a little bit, but they're really kind of just contained appliances. We saw a lot of drink machines. Naturally, like there's a couple bartendery type of things. Bartesian was there again. There's also one or two others. DrinkWorks was there, and they were actually at our event, Food Tech Live, and so many other drink machines. Guys, what was your favorite drink machine? I actually was most excited about seeing Spin, which as the Spoon readers know, I've been writing about since I ordered one 4 years ago. And they had a working version of this, and they showed the innards of the device. Chris, you interviewed them. I tasted one of their crema-based coffee drinks. It was really pretty good. I was pretty excited to see that.
Yeah, funny story. When I got back, I went to a dinner party at a friend's house and met a woman for the first time, and she was, and I told her what I did, and she actually had ordered the Spin years ago and was like, "I am really thinking of canceling," and I'm like, "No, I saw it. It's a real thing. I talked with the guy. He's, it's happening." So yeah, I think it's, we see this idea of convenience, and the Zoom or the Spin you can control with your phone. And it's a coffee marketplace, so it knows when you need to reorder and all this other stuff. And then the DrinkWorks are these pods. Same with the Bartesian. Although everything in the DrinkWorks, I was happy to try it for the first time, because what I didn't realize is the DrinkWorks has everything in the pod. You just stick it in. It's got the alcohol. It's got the flavorings. Yep. It's got everything. Unlike I think the Bartesian has you fill up spirits, like neutral grain spirits on the side or whatever.
Yeah, and that's why actually DrinkWorks is taking so long to roll out, right? Like they're actually going state by state, complying with the specific liquor laws, because there's some. Believe it or not, you just can't send liquor in the mail to everyone. So that's what they're kind of trying to figure out, because they're a pod system you order. There's also a bunch of beer making machines in addition to like the Pico Brew, which we generally see every year. Beer maker. There's also a mini brew is there. There's another one, I think, Catherine, you swung by and saw.
Yeah, I saw a much larger scale one. I think it's in the keg, all caps. And that is a larger device. Like it looks like a fridge kind of, and it can store 10, they call it a keg, but I think it's a couple liters basically that you can, it's not a full size beer keg, but you can, it's sort of like a large scale pico brew, but you have to buy their little, their pods that you put in, has all the ingredients, you add water, and then it brews it and stores it, and you can dispense it as well with a tap on the keg. So it's geared, you're probably not going to have it at your home unless you're a really serious beer brewer, but it's something that would be at like restaurants or catering, places like that. And you could make your own custom beer. You can add infusions like pumpkin and stuff like that. I thought it was pretty cool.
There was also the matcha making machine.
Say it, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Chris,
that was good.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Chris, what did you think of it?
It's a very specific device. And when we were in Tokyo for Smart Kitchen Summit, Tokyo, Japan, I had some matcha over there from a street vendor and loved it and thought it was good. But I never, it's not the kind of thing that I would necessarily buy. It's a very elegant looking machine, right? And it what it does is very neat. It's very quiet. It has a little bamboo like stirrer thing, or it mimics the bamboo whisk that they use traditionally. And you just stick in the powder and it grinds it up for you and mixes it and all that stuff. But it's a really, I'm trying to figure out who would get the matcha maker.
Well, I think if you're really into matcha and you want to be a purist, like, believe it or not, this is like a piece of technology that can bring you closer to that, because it actually takes matcha tea leaves and grinds it to the powder. You're not buying a powder.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the Tang version of matcha, like what most of us Americans buy. It's actually grinding it. Jen, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I would totally buy it, honestly.
Really?
You would?
Yeah,
Awesome.
I would. Yeah.
Are you a matcha person?
I am a matcha person, and I definitely think that it's harder to find to make a decent matcha in the States. Like there's just the real thing is just not as available, like going into Kroger, you're not going to find what you need to make a decent matcha. So yeah, a machine.
And this was not like some like dudes from like Arizona trying to pass themselves. This guy, the CEO is actually Japanese. Like it was like, we have the video we'll actually be putting up later on our YouTube channel. Check it out. But like these guys were legit Japanese, bringing it here from Japan.
Yeah, and it is like it's a beautiful machine. It's unlike any other machine that I've seen, and it's also very quiet. And like I said, like you could have it on your counter, and it's a really cool conversation piece.
That actually makes me, so I wasn't there to see all these machines you all are talking about, but it makes me think of a question, which is, of all these different drink machines you all are talking about, how many are actually, for lack of a better phrase, good looking? Like, or how many will just look like another appliance cluttering up the kitchen?
Well, one I thought was really cool looking. First of all, the matcha one was good looking, but one I didn't actually mention in my wrap-up post was Roshan, which was a seltzer making machine that it's actually got a pretty big footprint. I think Richard Gunther wrote about it for The Spoon, and it carbonates and makes seltzer water, but also adds infusions. Like kind of they have their own kind of tasty infusions, but a lot of them actually just look. Not, or they take up a lot of space. They aren't particularly sexy, but Roshan looked good. I thought the matcha machine looked good. I thought Spin looked okay as well. Any feedback on that, Chris or Catherine?
Well, I think that most of them look like appliances, but I think this is a really good chance to segue. Catherine has a piece going up today about pod people and how a lot of these systems are using pods. Catherine, I thought that was a really nice piece that you wrote.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was something I remarked just wandering around Eureka Park and checking out a few other startups, and including several who are at Food Tech Live, is that there seems to be a lot of companies who are using pods as the base of their little devices, robots, whatever we want to call them. I mean, we mentioned DrinkWorks and Bartesian, but also I saw a little DIY nitro cold brew pod, and I guess the matcha isn't pods, but there's also... why am I blanking on it? Oh, like a little dessert pods, this Argentinian dessert pod company. So I was seeing a lot of pods and kind of wondering, as well as the beer one that I mentioned earlier, are people going to like that? the pods offer a lot of convenience, a lot of speed, a lot of consistency, but do people like being locked into having to buy this pod from this one particular maker all the time if they want to use this device that they've invested in?
Well, I have to say that, like, a thought that occurred to me, and I had a piece in mind, and I'm sorry, Kath, I haven't read your piece yet, but like, I just feel like what I liked about the Spin and Terra Cafe, the TK01 machine, which was also FoodTech Live, is like, I feel like those machines help us kind of exit the pods. Like, I feel like one of the problems I always had with Keurig, I eventually got rid of it, was I just hated all that plastic I was putting into the waste stream. And sure, you can get compostable pods, right? But like, if I can actually get a grinding brew machine that grinds it fresh rather than like these pre-ground pods, like that's like something I'm fully on board with.
Yeah, absolutely. That was something I at least thought for myself. The way the future is these machines that allow you to put in your own ingredients. Keurig even has that, though it's not as easy. Like you say, they have these little reusable pots, but you have to put your own pre-ground in there. So that's a little bit more work, a little bit more inconsistency. And then something like a Pico Brew, you can put in some of your own ingredients as well. So maybe that's kind of the way the future, the Spins of the world and these Pico Brews that let you put in your own ingredients or just aren't relying on pods and are a full all-in-one machine in and of themselves.
Yeah, I'm doing a review of the Chime Chai Tea Maker, connected chai tea maker. And it's actually really good, and I'll have a full review up this week, I think. But it has the biggest drawback is the plastic pods, and I talked with the founder Gaurav about it, and he was just like, I can't find anything else that keeps things like the tea leaves fresh. And if I could, I would, but there's no other thing except plastic. So it's a bummer right now. But like, I think, this idea of how many pods do we want in the world, especially for olive oil?
Right. Yeah, that was a fun one. Though actually, to be fair, the olive oil, I believe, comes just in a frozen little globe situation. Like, yes, it comes in something you have to unwrap, but then it's just a frozen olive oil pod sphere situation that you pop in there and then defrost. So that's a bit niche. I don't know how well that'll do in the US market, but just goes to show everything is being podified.
Another trend that I saw starting, it's early, and really GE was kind of the one that I saw really kind of pushing this the most in the big appliance space, was this idea of like shiftable, adaptable spaces. And I really like this idea. Chris, if you remember the first Smart Kitchen Summit, you were there. There is a startup that actually won the Startup Showcase, a company called Tailsa. I think they changed their name now, but they were this idea that like, hey, your kitchen space basically adapts to you depending on your height or whatever. And GE basically was showing this idea off. Now, they only had a kind of a concept video because I talked to them and they said they felt like it may be a little bit kind of dangerous actually doing like a full built out kitchen with their kitchen space moving around a little bit at CES. But like, I like this idea. I mean, why couldn't we have as robotics and automation get cheaper? Why can't we have the kitchen adapt to us? I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, but okay. So did you I don't know. Did you remodel your kitchen?
We are in the midst of getting new countertops. Like the actual full remodel, we scaled back on just because it's so expensive.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the things I think about. Like, I haven't had to remodel a kitchen, but like the idea of, okay, I want these on rails. So, they can raise and lower. I think sounds really good, but I just imagine that would, and I know all this stuff will come down in price, but I'm just trying to figure out like.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. Like it's obviously going to be expensive, right? But like the one use case they showed was a person in a wheelchair. So, I mean, Johnny Gray talks a lot about this multi-generational kitchen concept. And if you do have like your mom coming with you rather than putting kind of shuffling your parents off to an old folks home, like if you had in a kitchen that adapted to a person like with limited dexterity or mobility, it might be cheaper than paying for them to be in an old folks home. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be more expensive, but like maybe there are cases where it's worthwhile.
It makes me wonder if in time, obviously not anytime soon, because this is still pretty early days, if some of those adaptable features would start to get just actually built into new homes as they're put up.
Yeah, like as you're building it from scratch rather than as a kind of a tear and replace.
So eventually we get to a point where you don't necessarily have to remodel the kitchen. You can instead look and, you're looking at a real estate listing because you're buying a house. It's listed in the features, the various pieces of adaptability in the kitchen.
Yeah, and there's a number of startups that are actually creating these these furniture systems. Like I think one of them is like maybe Bumblebee or something, where they basically it's a bedroom at night, and then you wake up and press a button, and like the bed lifts up to the ceiling, and then you have couches. So if you think about like space constrained urban environments where like you have only one room, and you basically have to like have a futon, and like you're sleeping in the space where you're convening during the day. If you have like a system that actually you press a button and the bed raises up and then like it converts, like I think these conversion systems using like robotics, whatever, that convert the room to like a new use case, they're just going to be more common, right? And maybe it's ultimately cheaper than having more real estate in a dense urban environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Jen, you actually wrote about this. You were watching from afar. You weren't actually at CES, but like there's a bunch of announcements around home grow systems, not a bunch, at least a few, right? And I think it actually followed on from Mila acquiring a home hydroponics startup, and then like at CES, GE and LG and Samsung all announced or showed off proof of concepts. Do you think this is something that's going to become more mainstream with these big guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there were a few others at CES as well that maybe they're not full-on appliances in the traditional sense of the word, but I know the PlantyCube folks were showing off their system, which is basically everybody's comparing it to Legos. Essentially, you can bolt pieces on and build your own you can make the system as big or as small as you need to, depending on the constraints of your home. And I think looking from something as modular and as that all the way up to LG and Samsung, and why am I blanking on who the other one is? Oh, GE, sorry. Where they're actually full-on appliances that can be built right into the kitchen. Yeah, I think we're just seeing this whole category of indoor farming for the consumer specifically open up, which I think is fantastic. I think it's going to be a while before it becomes commonplace, but kind of like the adaptable kitchen, I really think we'll see a day when, you go to IKEA, you can go to their kitchen department and pick out pieces to build your kitchen with. Some sort of indoor farming appliance will exist among the different other things you can add to a kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the Samsung implementation was the closest, because what they basically had was a stand-up fridge,
right?
With a clear glass window, and then obviously like optimized environments for growing stuff versus like chilling stuff. But the GE one was the biggest kind of moonshot concept, but my problem with that is like I liked it, but it took up an entire kitchen. But again, right. I don't want to knock them for it because they're just kind of showing like a proof of concept. So like it was just an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see proof of concepts that may not even necessarily be practical in the average kitchen. I mean, my kitchen would certainly not fit that, but because it shows us what some of the possibilities are for getting these farming systems in the house. And I think Chris and I have talked about this a little bit in the past. I think it's also sort of redefining a little bit what a farm even is. It just makes me wonder, 5 years down the road, how many people will just be growing their own greens in the house instead of going to Publix and buying a bag of them.
So there's another guy I met, and I'll come back and I'll put it in the show notes, or I'll write a post about it, because I thought it was an interesting company. But he was basically a French startup CEO that did basically greenhouse as a service. It's basically like putting greenhouse either on your rooftop or even in your home in a small space, and it was fully managed and automated. And it was a cool concept. So I like that idea.
Was that in Eureka Park?
I think it was in Eureka Park, and I actually met the CEO at a dinner the night before.
I saw that.
Did you swing?
Really cool.
So you saw it, right?
I didn't talk to him, but yeah, it's a mini greenhouse, like about the size of a car, maybe like a small car. And so, I mean, you could totally fit one in your backyard if you had a backyard, or a rooftop if you were in an apartment building. And then that does give you more flexibility than just purely leafy greens. At least they were growing more than that in the demo.
Yeah, and that's one of the knocks on like home kind of kitchen centric ones, or these smaller footprint ones, is like you're mainly going to get herbs and leafy greens. You're not going to get pumpkins or whatever. Like you grow big, but like the bigger you get and like more kind of like closer to a greenhouse, you can do the bigger stuff.
It's funny that the same woman who had ordered the spin at this dinner the other night also had, it's Urban Grow or something like that. I think she had a home, like they installed a home green growing kit. And it was, I was like, oh, what can you grow? And she was, herbs and spices, herbs and greens and stuff. But the problem she ran into is that it broke. And getting it, having to get it repaired. It was still sitting like just idle. There's like, yeah, we totally need to get it fixed, but it just didn't, I don't know how many greenhouse repair people there are in the world.
Probably not a ton.
Yeah.
Not yet.
I think there's also the question of these indoor smart appliances. What are they going to do to your energy bills? How much water do they actually use? How much electricity do they actually use? I think, there are a lot of questions around that in terms of, are they even worth it for the average consumer, financially speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely your electricity bill might go up, but I also think one of the trends I started to see, not as much as I would like, is like a focus on sustainability. I think the GE proof of concept they were actually trying to take your dirty water and then like using it to kind of water your plants and kind of as part of the concept. There was also a startup called Sephora, where they basically had like a home composter built into your kind of food waste into your sink. And that was like a cool concept. So I think we're starting to see like a focus on like monitoring this stuff. And then there's just like a lot of water technology, monitoring how much water you're using sensors. So while we're seeing more gadgets that may take more electricity, we're also seeing like the application of technology to better monitor our resources in the home, like water or food waste. But what else do we see, guys? Like I didn't see everything. Any other thing that struck you at the show? Catherine, you walked around a lot, Eureka Park. Anything that you saw that you thought was interesting?
I did see some interesting technology that was trying to reduce food waste in cafeterias. Speaking of sustainability, so there are two companies. One at the beginning of the cafeteria journey, it's like weighted scales, where if you're going into Whole Foods or whatever, into the hot bar, when you scoop up your macaroni and cheese, it shows the weight of how much you're scooping, how much it'll cost you, and how many calories are in it. So it's for people who are like counting calories, I guess, or also just to give you a bit of a heads up so you don't get sticker shock when you put all your hot food stuff and then weigh it and you're like, whoa, that's way more than I wanted. And according to the CEO, who they're already operating in China and they're rolling out to the US later this month, actually, it's really cut down on the amount of food that people take and then throw away because they're not getting a ton because they think they're going to eat it and then not finishing it. But the real value is for the actual food providers because they can look and see, oh, people like it when these two foods are next to each other, or they are really hungry for this right now, but not this. So they can optimize their offerings. And then at the end of that journey, there's a company that has a image recognition software that it's like a little camera they put above the dish rack for like corporate or university cafeterias that'll look down and recognize how much food is left on people's plates and what the food is, and then report that to the food service so they can say, oh, people didn't like blah, blah, blah. They ate all of this, but not this, and sort of optimize their offerings around that.
Chris, you were there for Food Tech Live. Anything at that you saw that, hey, this is pretty cool?
I'm trying to. We mentioned the matcha thing that was cool, and the spin thing. I mean, I like the beer maker, and I don't even drink beer. It was the Kickstarted project that's shipping in April, and because what I like is that it's really flexible and it's made for. We've written about it before a few times, but it's if you've ever wanted to home brew but didn't. I've always found it intriguing, but the idea of having to sterilize hoses and buckets and making sure everything was right, it just makes me like I have no interest in that. But the beer maker uses these plastic bladders, these like bags basically, so it does all of the sterilization for you. You just throw stuff in and it takes care of all the fermenting and brewing. I think that's really neat. And you can also customize it. So you can throw in anything really into the top and then see how that affects the taste of your beer.
Now, you didn't mention how we're nearing the end of poop hands with the arrival of PassSpot. PassSpot is a technology to explain it, Chris. You
I was keeping it food related, but this is the PathSpot creates this device that restaurants should install, right? And basically it runs looks like an ultraviolet light over your hands to detect for foodborne pathogens, like basically poop hands, to make sure that you are washing your hands. Employees wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. And being in Las Vegas, I flew in that day, went to my hotel, and then went to the show. And I was really nervous to put my hands underneath the PathSpot, but thankfully I had washed well enough to where it came back. I came back fine. But that kind of thing, that's really interesting because foodborne illnesses can cost restaurants a lot of money. So this is it's not a sexy device, but it's one that's really useful. And I think that you're going to see, it can help restaurants save money. It's easy. It works into their existing workflow. And it's just a really, it's something nobody wants to get sick, food poisoning.
I'm surprised going through the Vegas airport and through a couple of casinos, your hands are not glowing bright green by the time you put those things underwear. I mean, goodness gracious. I'm always thankful when I get out of Vegas and not getting sick. I always bring a gallon of like that hand sanitizer stuff, but it's good to be back from Vegas. I spent a full week there. You guys are down there as well. Jen, you were kind of watching from afar. Thank you for taking care of a lot of the writing while we were gone. But this has been a lot of fun, guys, talking about what we saw at CES. I appreciate it. And I'm excited for 2020.
Yeah.
Yes. Bring it on.
Yes.
Bring it on. Let's go. All right. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.